Marcus Cole stood at the edge of Dock 47 and watched the rain of sparks fall from a welder's torch high above him. The orange light reminded him of sunsets back on Earth, a planet he had not seen in almost 4 years now. 3 months he had been stuck on the SAR station. Eating cheap protein paste and sleeping in a storage closet he rented from a Greth merchant who charged him 5 credits a night. His cargo hauler had been impounded the day he arrived, seized by Concord officials who claimed humans needed special permits to operate vessels in their space. Nobody had told him about permits when he left Earth. Nobody had told him about a lot of things. He checked his credit balance on the worn screen of his wrist device and felt his stomach tighten. 47 credits remained. Barely enough to survive another week on this station, where everything cost twice what it should. That was why he found himself walking toward the Galactic surplus auction that morning. Not because he had money to spend, but because he had nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. The auction house sat at the far end of the commercial district. A massive dome filled with broken ships and abandoned cargo, and all the things the galaxy had thrown away. Marcus slipped through the entrance and found a spot near the back wall where he could watch without being noticed. The crowd was thick with aliens of every shape and color, their translator devices filling the air with a constant hum of converted speech. A four-armed Vela stood on the central platform, his voice booming through speakers as he presented each item for sale. Cargo containers went for hundreds of credits, fuel cells for thousands, and ships, the ones that still worked, sold for amounts that made Marcus dizzy just to hear. He watched a sleek Kreth shuttle sell for 60,000 credits and shook his head. Even if he worked for 10 years, he would never afford something like that. The auction continued for hours, and Marcus was about to leave when the Velith auctioneer suddenly paused and made a sound that the translator rendered as nervous laughter. Lot 77. The Velith announced, and something in his tone had changed. We now present Lot 77, a vessel of unknown origin recovered from deep space salvage operations. 17 years ago, a massive display screen flickered to life behind him, showing an image that made several aliens in the crowd gasp or chitter or make whatever sounds their species used to express shock. The ship on the screen was ugly in a way Marcus had never seen before. It was all hard angles and thick armor plating, painted in colors so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. No smooth curves, no elegant design, just brutal functionality wrapped in metal that looked thick enough to stop a cannon blast. Vessel designation TH, V Obsidian. The Velith continued, reading from his datapad with obvious reluctance. Species of origin unknown, possibly Voreth based on design elements. Power core status non-functional. Navigation systems incompatible with all known galactic standards. Estimated repair costs exceed the value of raw materials by a factor of 12. A Kreth merchant near the front made a loud clicking sound that the translator turned into mocking laughter. Why waste our time with this garbage? He demanded. That thing is not a ship. It is a coffin with engines. Several other aliens voiced agreement, and Marcus watched as nearly half the crowd began moving toward the exits. The Velith auctioneer seemed almost embarrassed as he continued his presentation. The vessel has been examined by 17 different engineering teams over the past decade. He explained. None have been able to activate its primary systems. The control interface appears to require direct manual operation with no neural link compatibility and no AI integration capability. More laughter filled the dome, and Marcus felt his eyebrows rise with interest. Manual operation, he thought. No neural links, no AI. Starting bid is set at 5,000 credits, the Velith announced, though his voice carried no hope. Do I have 5,000 credits for Lot 77? Silence filled the auction house. 4,000 credits. The auctioneer tried. 3,000, 2,000. 1,000 credits for a vessel with a fully intact hull and functional life support. Still nothing. The remaining aliens looked at the ugly ship on the screen and saw only a worthless relic of a dead civilization. The Velith sighed, a gesture that apparently translated across species. 500 credits, he said. 100 credits. I am authorized to accept any reasonable offer simply to clear this vessel from our dock space. A Thesan trader shouted from somewhere in the middle of the crowd. Pay me to take it and I might consider hauling it to the scrapyards. Laughter erupted again, and the auctioneer seemed ready to simply end the lot without a sale. Marcus raised his hand. The laughter died instantly as every alien in the room turned to look at the human standing alone near the back wall. Their eyes, those who had eyes, widened with confusion and what might have been pity. The human bids. The Velith said slowly, as if he could not quite believe what he was seeing. What is your offer for lot 77? 10 credits, Marcus said, and his voice was steady even though his heart was pounding. I will give you 10 credits for the ship. Silence stretched through the dome for a long moment before the Kreth merchant, who had mocked the vessel earlier, burst into chittering laughter once more. Humans, he said to his companions. They really are as stupid as the stories claim. He just paid 10 credits for a pile of scrap that will never fly. The auctioneer processed the sale with visible relief, transferring ownership to Marcus with a few quick gestures on his datapad. The vessel is yours. Human, he said. Dock 47, Bay 12. Please remove it within 3 standard days, or additional fees will apply. Marcus walked out of the auction house with alien laughter, following him through the doors, but he did not care. Something about that ship had called to him. Something in its brutal design and its manual controls and its stubborn refusal to work for any species that had tried to claim it. Found Bay 12 at the far end of Dock 47, and there it was, the obsidian, even uglier in person than it had appeared. On the screen, its armor was scarred and pitted from who knew how many years drifting through space, and its hull seemed to absorb the harsh station lights rather than reflect them. Marcus pressed his palm against the entry panel and felt a slight vibration run through the metal. The airlock groaned open with a sound of ancient hydraulics, and stale air rushed out to meet him. He stepped inside and sealed the door behind him. The interior was dark, lit only by a few emergency strips that cast everything in dim red light. Marcus moved carefully through the corridor, his hand trailing along the wall until he found what he was looking for. A panel covered in physical switches and mechanical gauges. Things he had not seen since his childhood in his grandfather's workshop. No touchscreens here. No voice commands or neural interfaces. Just buttons and levers and dials that expected a living hand to operate them. Marcus smiled in the darkness and began flipping switches one by one. Lights flickered on throughout the ship, systems humming to life with sounds of mechanical movement rather than the silent efficiency of modern technology. He found the cockpit and settled into the pilot's seat, his hands wrapping around a physical throttle that felt solid and real in his grip. The console before him was covered in analog instruments, needles and numbers that moved with honest precision. The aliens had looked at this ship and seen primitive technology, obsolete and useless. They had tried to interface with it using their neural links and their AI systems and their wireless connections, and the ship had rejected them all. But Marcus had grown up rebuilding ancient cars with his grandfather. He had learned to read gauges and feel engines and trust his own hands more than any computer. This ship was not broken, it had simply been waiting for someone who remembered how things used to be done. He pushed the throttle forward, and the obsidian roared to life beneath him, its engines shaking the entire vessel with raw power that he could feel in his bones. Through the cockpit window, he saw dockworkers stopping to stare, their alien faces twisted with disbelief as the Dead ship began to move. Marcus guided the Obsidian out of Bay 12 and into open space, leaving the Sara station and all its mocking laughter far behind him. The galaxy had thrown this ship away like garbage, but Marcus Cole had found treasure, and he was just getting started. News traveled fast on the Sara station, especially news that seemed impossible. Within hours of Marcus Cole leaving Dock 47, every alien on the station had heard the story of the human who flew the dead ship. They gathered at the observation decks to watch him bring the Obsidian back for its first landing. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the ugly vessel as it moved through the traffic lanes. Most expected to see an explosion, a crash, or at least some kind of spectacular failure. Instead, they saw the impossible. The Obsidian moved through space like nothing in the modern fleet. Where other ships glided with silent grace and computer-perfect precision, this vessel roared and rumbled and carved its path with raw mechanical force. It did not drift or float, it charged, its engines burning with visible fire that left trails of light in the darkness. Marcus brought the ship down onto the landing pad with a heavy thump that shook the entire dock. And when he walked down the boarding ramp, he found a crowd of aliens waiting for him with expressions he could not quite read. A Thesan dock supervisor stepped forward, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. "How?" he asked, his translator crackling with the force of his confusion. 17 engineering teams examined that vessel over 10 years, and none could make it function. "What did you do?" Marcus shrugged his shoulders and gave the alien a small smile. "I turned it on," he said simply. "You just have to know which buttons to push." The supervisor stared at him as if he had spoken in a language no translator could convert, and Marcus walked past him toward the station interior. He had work to do if he wanted to keep his new ship, and standing around answering questions would not pay for fuel and supplies over the following weeks. Marcus learned everything he could about the Obsidian. He crawled through every corridor and compartment, studied every system and mechanism, and slowly pieced together the story of the ship that everyone else had abandoned. The vessel had been built by a species called the Vorath, a name Marcus found etched into metal plates throughout the ship. The Vorath had vanished from the galaxy more than 40,000 years ago, and most records of their civilization had been lost or destroyed. What little remained described them as warriors, a proud and fierce people who had refused to follow the path of other spacefaring races. Their ships reflected that pride. Where other civilizations had embraced automation and artificial intelligence and networked systems that connected everything together, the Vorath had built their vessels for independence. No computer could override a Vorath captain. No signal could shut down a Vorath engine. No hacker could take control of a Vorath ship. Every system on the Obsidian required direct manual operation. The pilot had to fly with their own hands, aim weapons with their own eyes, and make every decision without assistance from any machine. It was exhausting and demanding and completely alien to every species in the modern galaxy. Every species except humans. Marcus understood now why 17 engineering teams had failed. They had approached the ship with neural interfaces and wireless connections, and AI programs designed to integrate with foreign systems. They had expected the ship to meet them halfway, to adapt to their methods. To make itself easy to control, the Obsidian did not negotiate. It demanded that the pilot come to it, that they learn its ways and earn its power through skill and effort. Modern aliens found this concept so foreign that they could not even begin to understand it. But Marcus had been born on a planet where people still fix things with their hands, where knowledge passed from grandparents to grandchildren through work and practice and patience. He knew how to listen to an engine, how to feel when something was wrong, how to trust his instincts when instruments gave no answers. He started taking jobs that other pilots refused to consider. A salvage company hired him to recover cargo from an asteroid field that destroyed 3 AI-guided drones every month. Marcus flew the obsidian into that chaos of spinning rocks and emerged with a full hold and barely a scratch on his armor. Our research team paid him to transport sensitive equipment through a nebula that scrambled all electronic sensors. Marcus navigated by visual reference and gut feeling, delivering his cargo perfectly on schedule while a convoy of modern ships waited at the edge of the nebula. Too afraid to enter, word spread through the shipping lanes and trading posts of the outer sectors. There was a human flying an ancient ship, taking contracts in places where no sane pilot would go, and somehow surviving every time. Marcus earned credits faster than he could spend them, and he used that money to repair and upgrade the obsidian. New armor plating welded over old scars, fresh fuel cells installed in the engine room, weapon systems cleaned and calibrated for the first time in millennia. The ship responded to his care like a living thing. Its engines ran smoother, its hull seemed stronger, and Marcus could swear he felt something almost like gratitude in the way it handled under his command. He also attracted attention. He did not want pirates began to track his movements, hoping to capture the strange vessel and sell it for study or scrap. 3 separate crews tried to ambush him in the first month alone, and 3 separate crews limped away with burned hulls and broken weapons. The obsidian's armor was not just thick, it was designed to absorb and deflect energy in ways that modern ships could not match. Pirate cannons that would have crippled any other vessel barely scorched the Vorath plating, and the ship's weapons, once Marcus figured out how to aim them manually, hit with devastating precision. Modern targeting systems could be fooled by countermeasures and jamming signals, but a human eye looking through a physical scope cared nothing for electronic tricks. By the end of his second month flying the obsidian, Marcus Cole had become a legend in the outer sectors. Traders called him the Ghost Pilot, and his ship earned names in a dozen alien languages that all translated to something like the Dark Spirit or the ship that should not fly. He took jobs deeper and deeper into dangerous space, pushing further from Concord territory into regions where law meant nothing and only strength mattered. Each mission paid better than the last, and each mission taught him more about what the obsidian could do late at night. Alone in his cockpit with stars streaming past the windows, Marcus sometimes wondered about the Vorath who had built this incredible machine. What had happened to them? He asked himself. Why had they vanished so completely that even their ships were considered worthless junk? He searched the galactic databases for information, but found almost nothing. A few scattered references, some academic papers that dismissed the Vorath as a minor civilization of no historical importance, and a lot of empty space where records should have been. Something about that emptiness troubled him, like a puzzle with missing pieces that changed the entire picture. 40,000 years was a long time, but civilizations did not simply vanish without leaving traces. Someone had erased the Vorath from history, and Marcus wanted to know why. The answer would come sooner than he expected, and it would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy and his place in it. But for now, he had contracts to complete and credits to earn, and a ship that needed him as much as he needed it. Marcus pushed the throttle forward and felt the obsidian respond with eager power, its ancient engines singing a song that no other pilot in the galaxy could hear. The Ghost Pilot and his impossible ship flew on into the darkness, and somewhere far away, something old and powerful began to watch. Beyond the borders of Concord space, where laws faded into suggestions and suggestions became meaningless, there existed a realm of pure power ruled by those strong enough to take it. This was the territory of the Dominion of Keth, a military empire that had expanded for 3 centuries under the command of warlords who answered to no authority but their own. The current warlord was called Siphax the Undying, a title he had earned by surviving 17 assassination attempts and crushing every rival who dared to challenge his throne. He was a creature of the Keth species, Standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales like black iron and eyes that burned with cold intelligent Syshix, ruled from his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, a warship so massive that it blocked out stars when it passed. His fleet numbered in the hundreds, and his influence stretched across dozens of systems where merchants and travelers paid tribute or faced destruction. Nothing moved through his territory without his knowledge. Nothing challenged his authority without facing immediate and overwhelming response. This was the order Sythix had built, and for 20 years it had remained, unbroken until the reports began arriving about a ship that refused to obey the rules. The first report came from a border patrol that had attempted to stop an unregistered vessel entering Dominion space. The patrol commander described a strange ship of unknown design that had ignored all hailing signals, broken through the checkpoint formation, and outrun the pursuit craft sent after it. Sythix dismissed the report as incompetence and ordered the patrol commander executed for failing his duty. The second report arrived a week later from a cargo inspection station. The same vessel had appeared again, delivering supplies to a mining colony that operated under Dominion protection. When the inspectors demanded the standard tribute payment, the ship simply flew away before they could lock their weapons. The third report made Sythix put down his drink and actually pay attention. A smuggler well known to Dominion intelligence had been captured trying to move stolen technology through restricted space, and during interrogation, he revealed that he had hired the strange ship to transport his cargo. The smuggler described a human pilot flying a vessel so heavily armored that scanner beams could not penetrate its hula human. Sythix thought with growing curiosity. Flying a ship that his forces could not stop, ordered his intelligence network to gather everything they could find about this mysterious pilot. And the information that returned painted a picture that made the old warlord smile for the first time in months. The human was called Marcus Cole, a refugee from Earth who had somehow acquired an ancient Vorath warship and learned to operate its primitive systems. He had become famous in the outer sectors for taking impossible jobs and surviving dangers that destroyed other pilots. Most interesting of all, no one had been able to capture or destroy him despite numerous attempts. Sythix recognized quality when he saw it. This human had something that most beings in the galaxy lacked. Something that Sythix himself understood very well: the willingness to fight for survival with nothing but skill and determination. He decided to test this human personally. The warlord dispatched his most capable lieutenant, a Keth warrior named Vorus, who had never failed a mission in 15 years of service, with orders to intercept the human vessel and capture the pilot alive. Vorus took 6 of the Dominion's fastest gunships and set an ambush in the Graven Corridor, a narrow passage between 2 asteroid belts that every ship traveling through this sector had to cross. Marcus entered the corridor 3 days later, expecting nothing more than another routine transit. He had made this run twice before without incident, and his sensors showed clear space ahead with no unusual activity. The trap sprung when he reached the midpoint of the passage. 6 gunships dropped out of hiding positions among the asteroids, their weapons already locked and their shields raised to maximum power. They surrounded the Obsidian in a perfect formation that left no escape route, and Vorus broadcast his demands across all frequencies. "Human pilot," the lieutenant announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never been defeated. "You have entered Dominion territory without authorization and refused to pay proper tribute. By order of Warlord Sythix the Undying, you will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Marcus looked at the 6 ships surrounding him and felt his heart rate increase. The gunships were fast and well-armed, crewed by experienced warriors who had spent their lives fighting and killing. His Obsidian was tough, but 6-to-1 odds in an enclosed space with nowhere to run seemed like a battle he could not win he could surrender. Voris had offered capture rather than destruction. And maybe he could find a way to escape later, or he could trust his ship and his skills and do what the Vorath had designed this vessel to do. Marcus killed the lights inside his cockpit, plunging himself into total darkness. His hands found the manual gunnery controls by touch alone, mechanical systems that required no power and produced no energy signature that enemy sensors could detect. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and through his forward window, he could see the running lights of the enemy ships. Glowing against the black, the Dominion gunships waited for a response, their crews watching their sensors for any sign of movement or weapon activation. They saw nothing because there was nothing electronic to see. Marcus fired. His first shot took the nearest gunship through its engine section. A precise hit that he aimed by looking through a physical scope mounted on his console. The enemy vessel exploded in a ball of fire before its crew even understood they were under attack. The remaining 5 ships scattered in confusion as Marcus pushed his throttle forward and dove toward the asteroid belt. Their sensors struggled to track him because the Obsidian produced almost no electronic emissions. Its ancient systems running on mechanical power that modern equipment was not designed to detect. Voris screamed orders at his pilots, demanding they form up and coordinate their fire. But coordination required communication, and communication required systems that the dense asteroid field was disrupting with natural interference. Marcus hunted them through the rocks like a predator stalking prey. He knew his ship, knew how it moved and how much damage it could take. And he used that knowledge to get close to each enemy vessel before they could react. The second gunship fell when Marcus came up beneath it and fired directly into its reactor. The third died trying to flee, its pilot too panicked to watch where he was going. Crashing into an asteroid that his sensors failed to detect in time, the fourth and fifth ships actually managed to coordinate an attack, catching the Obsidian in a crossfire that lit up its armor with energy blasts. Marcus felt his ship shudder under the assault, warning lights flashing across his console. But the Vorath plating held firm against weapons that would have torn any modern vessel apart. He returned fire with both gun turrets, his hands working the mechanical controls with desperate precision. And 2 more explosions bloomed in the darkness of the corridor. Voris alone remained, his gunship damaged and his weapons nearly depleted. The lieutenant stared at his sensors in disbelief as the impossible ship turned toward him, its dark hull emerging from the asteroid shadows like something from a nightmare. He fled, pushing his engines beyond safety limits, and Marcus let him go. 1 survivor meant 1 witness, someone to carry the story back to whoever had sent this ambush. The Obsidian drifted among the debris of 4 destroyed gunships, its armor scorched but intact, its pilot breathing hard in the darkness of his cockpit. Marcus turned the lights back on and looked at his hands, steady despite everything, still resting on the controls that had saved his life somewhere in Dominion space. Voris delivered his report to Warlord Sithax with shame burning in his heart. He expected execution for his failure, but instead, the Warlord laughed, not mocking, but delighted. A worthy challenge, Sithax said, his eyes bright with hunger. Finally, after all these years, a worthy challenge. He composed a message personally and broadcast it across every frequency the Dominion controlled. Knowing the human would hear it eventually, Human called Marcus Cole. The message began. You fly a ghost ship built by a dead race, and you have killed my soldiers and defied my authority. I respect strength, and you have shown strength that surprises me. Come to the Ash Blue Nebula in 30 days, and face me directly. Let us see together whether your kind deserves to exist in this galaxy, or whether you will join the Vorath in extinction. Marcus received the message 12 hours later, sitting alone in his cockpit with the Obsidian humming softly around him. He read the Warlord's words 3 times, understanding exactly what they meant. This was not a challenge he could ignore or escape. Civax would hunt him forever if he ran, using all the resources of his dominion to track down and destroy the human who had embarrassed his forces. The only way forward was through. Marcus began plotting a course for the Ash Blue Nebula. And deep in the ship's ancient systems, something that might have been approval seemed to pulse through the metal. The journey to the Ash Blue Nebula would take 22 days at maximum speed, leaving Marcus with time to think and prepare and wonder whether he was flying toward his death. He spent the first week running combat drills and checking every system on the Obsidian twice, making sure his ship was ready for whatever waited at the end of this voyage. During the second week, while crawling through a maintenance shaft to inspect the coolant line, Marcus discovered something he had missed in all his previous explorations of the ship. A section of wall that looked solid but felt different when he pressed his hand against it. Slightly warmer than the surrounding metal and vibrating with a frequency he could barely sense. He searched for a control panel or switch but found nothing. The Vorath had hidden this door well, designed it to be invisible to casual inspection. Marcus spent 3 hours examining every inch of the wall before he noticed a small depression near the floor. Perfectly sized for a fingertip, he pressed it, and the wall slid open with a soft hiss of ancient hydraulics. Beyond the hidden door lay a chamber that took his breath away. It was small, barely large enough for 2 people to stand, but every surface was covered with storage, compartments and display screens and technology that made the rest of the ship look primitive by comparison. Marcus realized this must have been the captain's private archive, a secure room where the most important information was kept safe from damage or discovery. He approached the central console carefully, half expecting alarms to sound or defenses to activate. But nothing stopped him. The console came to life when he touched it, recognizing something in his biological signature that apparently satisfied its security protocols. Screens flickered with text in a language he could not read, accompanied by images and star maps and what looked like historical records stretching back thousands of years. Accompanied by images and star maps and what looked like historical records stretching back thousands of years. A case holographic projector in the center of the room activated. And suddenly Marcus was not alone. The figure that appeared before him was humanoid, but clearly not human. Taller and broader, with skin like burnished copper and features that seemed carved from stone. The being wore armor similar to what Marcus had seen in other parts of the ship. And its eyes, even as a hologram, burned with fierce intensity. "I am Captain Vorath of the Vorath Sovereignty," the figure announced, its voice resonating through the small chamber. "If you are seeing this message, then our fleet has fallen and our worlds have burned, and I am likely dead. You have found the Obsidian, the last ship of my command, and you have proven yourself capable of flying her. For this alone, you deserve to know the truth of what happened to my people." Marcus stood frozen as the hologram began to tell its story. And with every word, his understanding of the galaxy shifted and changed. The Vorath had not been a minor civilization forgotten by history. They had been one of the great powers of the ancient galaxy, masters of engineering and warfare who had built ships that could cross the stars when other species were still learning to use fire. Their empire had spanned hundreds of worlds, and their technology had been unmatched for 10,000 years. But the Vorath had chosen a different path than other spacefaring races. While civilizations around them embraced networked systems and artificial intelligence and the convenience of automated technology, the Vorath refused to surrender control of their ships and their worlds to any machine. They called this philosophy the way of hands, the belief that true strength came from skill earned through practice and wisdom gained through struggle. Other species did not understand. They looked at Vorath ships with their manual controls and physical systems and saw primitive technology, backward thinking, a stubborn refusal to progress with the rest of the galaxy. Diplomatic tensions grew as the Vorath insisted on maintaining their independence from the universal networks that connected all other civilizations. They called our ships obsolete. Captain Vorath continued, his holographic face showing ancient pain. They said we were holding back the advancement of all species by refusing to integrate with their systems. But we knew the truth that they could not see. Their networks made them dependent, made them weak, made them vulnerable to any force that could control the signals they relied upon. The conflict had begun as political disagreement and economic pressure, but it had not stayed peaceful for long. The great powers of the ancient galaxy, the ancestors of the species that now called themselves the Galactic Concord, had decided that the Vorath were too dangerous to exist. They feared what a civilization of independent ships and free-thinking warriors might do if allowed to continue growing stronger. War came without warning. A coordinated assault on every Vorath world at once. The attackers had numbers that seemed impossible. Fleets so vast they blocked out the stars, and weapons that could crack planets like eggs. The Vorath had fought back with everything they had. Their ships, designed for exactly this kind of desperate battle, had proven nearly impossible to disable through electronic warfare. They could not be hacked or jammed or controlled remotely. And their heavy armor laughed at weapons that destroyed lesser vessels with single shots. For 200 years the war raged across the galaxy, and the Vorath made their enemies pay in blood for every system they took. But numbers told in the end, as numbers always do, and one by one the Vorath worlds fell silent. We knew we could not win, Captain Vorath said, his voice heavy with grief. But we could make sure something survived. We hid our ships in places they would never think to look. Buried them in asteroid fields and abandoned them on dead moons and sent them drifting through empty space with their systems cold and their beacons dark. We hoped that someday someone would find them. The captain's eyes seemed to look directly at Marcus, as if seeing across 40,000 years of time. Someone who understood what we built and why we built it. Someone who valued independence over convenience and skill over automation. Someone who could fly our ships the way they were meant to be flown. The hologram flickered as if preparing to end, and Captain Vorath spoke his final words. You hold in your hands the last legacy of the Vorath sovereignty. Our ships, our weapons, our knowledge of a different way to live among the stars. Use them well, stranger. Fly them free. And remember that we existed. The projection faded, leaving Marcus alone in the archive chamber with tears on his cheeks that he did not remember crying. He understood now why no one had been able to fly the obsidian. The aliens who had tried were descendants of the very civilizations that had destroyed the Vorath. And they had inherited all the same assumptions and dependencies that had made them consider the Vorath primitive in the first place. They literally could not imagine operating a ship without the networked systems. Their ancestors had chosen over freedom, but humans were different. Humans had come to the stars only recently, still carrying memories of older ways and older technologies. Humans knew how to fix things with their hands and fly by instinct and trust themselves when machines failed. The Vorath had been waiting for someone like Marcus. And now he carried their story and their mission and their hope for the future. He returned to his cockpit with new purpose burning in his heart. The warlord Siphax wanted to test whether humanity deserved to exist in this galaxy. And Marcus intended to show him exactly what humans and Vorath ships could do together. The ash-blue nebula waited ahead, glowing crimson against the darkness of space. And Marcus pushed the throttle forward one more time. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had ever been told their way of doing things was obsolete. For everyone who had been erased from history because they refused to surrender their independence. He was fighting for the Vorath, and he would not let them down. The ash-blue nebula burned across the darkness of space like a wound in the fabric of reality itself. its crimson clouds lit from within by the radiation of dying stars. Ancient vessels had vanished into that red mist, never to return. And legends spoke of ghost ships still drifting through its depths after thousands of years. This was the arena warlord Scythax had chosen for their battle, and Marcus understood exactly why. The nebula's electromagnetic interference would scramble sensors and communications, creating chaos for any fleet that relied on networked coordination and AI-assisted targeting. It was a place where modern advantages meant nothing, and only raw skill determined survival. Scythax was testing him, Marcus realized. The warlord wanted to see if the human could fight in conditions that stripped away every technological crutch. Marcus smiled as the Obsidian approached the nebula's edge. These conditions would have terrified any other pilot in the galaxy, but for him and his ancient ship, this was exactly where they belonged. He entered the crimson clouds and immediately felt the interference wash over his vessel. Modern sensors would have gone blind. Navigation computers would have crashed. Weapon systems would have lost their targeting data. But the Obsidian's mechanical instruments kept working perfectly. Needles and gauges responding to physical forces that no electromagnetic field could block deep within the nebula. Warlord Scythax waited aboard the Dominion's Wrath with his remaining fleet arranged around him in a sphere of death. 47 warships of various sizes, their weapons charged and their crews eager to destroy the human who had humiliated their forces. The Warlord sat on his command throne watching the crimson darkness beyond his windows. His sensors were useless in here, as he had known they would be, but he had prepared for this battle carefully. His ships were equipped with visual tracking systems and manual backup controls. Modifications he had ordered specifically for this engagement. Scythax had not survived 20 years as warlord by being unprepared. "He comes," one of his officers announced, pointing toward a shadow moving through the clouds. The human approaches from the lower vector. The warlord leaned forward in his throne, all four of his eyes fixed on the darkness. "All ships, engage the moment you have visual confirmation. I want that vessel crippled, not destroyed. The pilot is mine to kill personally." The first Dominion ship to spot the Obsidian fired immediately, its cannons blazing through the red mist. Marcus threw his ship into a sharp dive, feeling the shots pass close enough to heat his hull, and vanished back into the denser clouds before other ships could target him. The Battle of Ashblood had begun for the first hour. Marcus played the role of predator rather than prey. He knew his ship could survive direct hits that would destroy modern vessels, but 47 enemies were too many to fight head-on, even for the Obsidian. Instead, he used the nebula itself as a weapon, appearing from the crimson shadows to strike at isolated ships before vanishing again. His manual gunnery proved devastatingly effective in conditions that made automated targeting worthless. While Dominion crews struggled to calibrate their backup systems and coordinate without communications, Marcus simply looked through his scope and fired. Each shot flew true because human eyes and human hands needed no calibration. 7 ships fell in that first hour, their hulls cracked open by precise shots to weak points that no computer had ever mapped. Their crews died confused and terrified, unable to understand how an ancient relic was hunting them so effectively. Shix watched his fleet shrink and felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. He had expected the human to be skilled, but this was something beyond skill. This was a predator born for exactly this kind of hunt. "All ships converge on my position," the warlord commanded. "Form a defensive sphere. If we cannot hunt him, we will make him come to us." The remaining Dominion vessels gathered around the flagship, their weapons pointed outward into the crimson darkness. It was a solid strategy, Marcus admitted as he watched from a distance. Breaking through that formation would be nearly impossible, and trying to pick off individual ships would become much harder when they covered each other. He could leave. The nebula had multiple exit points, and none of the Dominion ships could catch him if he chose to run. Scythax might send hunters after him eventually, but Marcus would have time to disappear into the vast galaxy. But running meant leaving the warlord alive to threaten others. And it meant betraying the legacy of the Vorath, who had fought against overwhelming odds for 2 centuries rather than surrender their freedom. Marcus pushed the throttle forward and flew straight toward the Dominion formation. The sphere of warships opened fire as he approached, filling space with energy blasts that turned the Crimson Nebula white with fury. Marcus flew through that storm of destruction with nothing but instinct and reflexes guiding his path, his hands working the controls with desperate precision as his armor took hit after hit. The obsidian shuddered and groaned, warning lights flashing across every console, but the ancient Vorath plating held firm. These were weapons designed to destroy modern ships with their light hulls and efficient construction, against armor built to survive anything. They were merely painful rather than fatal. Marcus burst through the defensive formation and found himself face to face with the Dominion's wrath itself. The flagship was enormous, 10 times the size of his vessel, bristling with weapons that could crack planetary shields. Against any other ship in the galaxy, it would have been an impossible enemy. But Marcus was not flying any other ship. He dove toward the flagship's belly, where the sensors were weakest and the armor was thinnest. Scythax's crew scrambled to track him, their backup systems too slow to follow his erratic movements. Marcus opened fire with everything the obsidian had, pouring shots into the same spot, again and again until armor plating buckled and internal systems began to fail. Scythax abandoned his throne and rushed to the manual helm, controls that his engineers had installed for exactly this situation. The warlord was no stranger to flying ships himself, and he had not risen to power by letting others fight his battles for the next hour. 2 ships dueled through the crimson clouds of Ashblood. The massive flagship against the ancient cruiser, the warlord against the human. Power against skill in a contest that neither could afford to lose. They traded blows that would have destroyed lesser vessels. The obsidian's armor cracked and burned, while the Dominion's wrath bled atmosphere from a dozen wounds. Both ships were dying, but neither pilot would surrender in the end. It was a single moment that decided everything. Scythax saw an opening and ordered his ship to fire a full broadside that would finally crack the obsidian in half. But his vessel's AI, damaged and struggling, attempted an automatic course correction at exactly the wrong moment. For 1 critical second, the warlord's commands were overridden by a system trying to optimize his attack. That second was all Marcus needed. He fired once, a perfect shot through a gap in the flagship's armor that his human eyes had spotted, and tracked throughout the entire battle. The shot penetrated deep into the vessel's reactor, and the Dominion's wrath split in 2 with a sound like a dying god screaming. Scythax the Undying finally died, killed by the very technology he had trusted to make him stronger. Marcus flew the battered obsidian out of the Ashblood Nebula and into clear space, leaving behind the wreckage of a fleet and the corpse of a warlord. His ship was barely functioning, its armor shattered, and its systems failing one by one. But it had survived, just as the Vorath had designed it to survive. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. The human who had destroyed the Dominion fleet became a legend overnight, and the story of his ancient ship inspired questions that no one had thought to ask in thousands of years. Other Vorath vessels began to surface at auctions and salvage yards across known space, and every time it was a human who bought them. Merchants who had laughed at Marcus on the Sar station now watched in disbelief as humanity built a fleet from the forgotten remnants of an extinct civilization. 6 months after the Battle of Ashblood, Marcus stood on the observation deck of a repair station and watched a dozen human-piloted Vorath ships conducting formation exercises. Their pilots had come from Earth and its colonies. People who had grown up fixing things with their hands and trusting their own skills over any machine. They called themselves the Inheritors, and they had sworn to carry the Morath legacy forward into a future where freedom and independence meant something. Again, Marcus felt the obsidian humming beneath his feet, its ancient systems finally repaired and stronger than ever. The ship had given him everything, and he had given it a purpose worth flying for. "We remember," he said quietly to the ghosts of Devarath who might still be watching. "And the galaxy will never forget." The obsidian's engines roared to life, and the human fleet took to the stars together, writing a new chapter in a story that had waited 40,000 years for someone to continue it. This was humanity's place in the galaxy, now not as newcomers begging for acceptance, but as inheritors of a legacy that valued everything they had always been, and they were just getting started.